My sister ran off with my groom just hours before the wedding. Now she sat in the corporate VIP row as I exposed her company's failing ethics report on a 40-foot screen. My wedding day wasn't just ruined, it became the stage for a betrayal so brutal, it twisted my entire life into a nightmare. But sometimes, when everything falls apart, you discover who you truly are and who you're meant to be. I was standing there alone in the bridal suite of Lakeview Villa, my dream dress suddenly feeling like a lead weight. Every chime from the grandfather clock in the hall was a fresh stab, each toll piercing the fragile hope I desperately clung to all morning. Outside, the whispers swelled and faded, like waves of concern washing against my sanctuary. My phone was slick in my palm, my thumb hovering over Nathan's contact for the 100th time. No calls, no texts, just my own desperate messages filling the screen. Where are you? Please call me. Everyone is waiting. Is everything okay? The last one, sent 3 hours ago, just hung there, unanswered. A digital testament to my abandonment. It felt like just 2 weeks before, Nathan and I were laughing, twirling around our Boston apartment, practicing our first dance. The autumn sun streamed in, turning his face golden as he dipped me dramatically. "You're going to make the most beautiful bride," he'd whispered, his blue eyes crinkling. "2 more weeks, Dr. Brenner, and you'll be stuck with me forever." I remember the warmth in my chest, that certainty that despite the crazy hours of my medical residency and his demanding startup, we'd found our center in each other. Then, just last Tuesday, my fellow residents surprised me with cupcakes and champagne in the hospital break room. Dr. Winters, my supervisor, raised her plastic cup to Callie she'd toasted, who somehow manages to be the most compassionate doctor on our floor while planning what I'm sure will be the wedding of the century. I blushed, but their support truly touched me. That night, Nathan called while I was still at the hospital. His voice was light, but I sensed a distraction. "Just one last business meeting tomorrow morning, then I'm all yours for the wedding weekend," he promised. "The investors are finally ready to commit. This could change everything for us, Cal." I smiled into the phone, picturing his hands, always so eager when he talked about his medical technology startup. "Go knock them dead," I told him. "I'll see you at the lake house Thursday night." That was it. Our last normal conversation. 3 days of silence followed, each hour tightening my nerves until they threatened to snap. Cold feet, my bridesmaids had suggested yesterday, their voices too bright, too reassuring. Men always panic before the big day. But Nathan wasn't just any man. And this wasn't just nerves. Something fundamental had shifted, something had broken loose and drifted away when I wasn't looking. What made it worse? My sister Delia's absence gnawed at me almost as much as Nathan's. Every time I called her, it was voicemail or a hurried text, "In a meeting, call you right back." But she never did. This morning, the wedding planner's concerned glances spoke volumes as she helped me button my dress. "I'm sure he's just running late," she said, checking her watch for the 4th time. Traffic from Boston can be unpredictable. But her eyes told a different story. A soft knock broke my reverie. My father's weathered face appeared in the doorway, his formal suit making him look older, more fragile. I'd never seen him look so uncertain. "Sweetheart," he said, his voice barely audible over the pounding in my chest. He crossed the room and took my trembling hands in his. The roughness of his palms grounded me, reminding me of the little girl who once believed her daddy could fix anything. His eyes met mine, deep pools of regret and fierce protection. "I think we need to tell everyone to go home." The words hovered, transforming everything I thought was meant to be. I swallowed hard, tasting the salt of tears I didn't remember shedding. He's not coming. Not a question, but the truth I'd known for hours but refused to admit. Dad shook his head once, his jaw tightening. "No, he's not." I closed my eyes briefly, gathering what dignity I had left. 200 guests waited below, cousins who flew in from California, college roommates who rearranged vacations, patients who switched shifts to celebrate. I stood a bride without a groom. "I'll do it," I said, straightening my spine. "I need to face them myself." The walk down the grand staircase felt endless. Each step brought a new wave of hushed conversation. That stopped abruptly at my appearance, not the entrance I had rehearsed. I stood before them and somehow found my voice. "I want to thank you all for coming today," I began, surprised by the steadiness in my words. "Unfortunately, the wedding will not be taking place. I'm so sorry for the inconvenience." Back in my hotel room later, I slid the diamond engagement ring from my finger, my grandmother's ring, reset with modern brilliance. It caught the late afternoon light, throwing prisms across the wall. For one terrible moment, I considered throwing it across the room, watching it disappear under the antique armoire. Instead, I placed it carefully in its velvet box and snapped it shut, locking away more than just platinum and diamonds. A week later, I found myself beneath a towering oak in Boston Common, my fingers wrapped around a paper cup of coffee gone cold. It had been 1 week since I stood alone in a wedding dress, trying to explain the unexplainable to 200 guests. The October breeze caught my hair, and I tucked an errant strand behind my ear, watching children chase pigeons across the path. The hospital had granted me 2 weeks leave, pity time, I called it privately, though I'd argued to return immediately. Work felt like the only solid ground left. Then, a familiar laugh cut through the park sounds. My body recognized it before my mind could process that distinctive 3-note cascade, starting high and tumbling down. Nathan's laugh. I froze, coffee sloshing over my knuckles. The burn barely registered as I turned toward the sound. Slow and mechanical, like a music box ballerina. There, by the water, Nathan walked with his arm looped through my sister's, his head bent toward hers, intimate and familiar. Delia tossed her hair. The same gesture from childhood when she got what she wanted. They hadn't noticed me yet, wrapped in their private bubble of conspiracy. Sunlight glinted off something on Delia's left hand as she reached up to touch Nathan's face. My grandmother's ring, reset with modern brilliance, now circled my sister's finger. The coffee cup slipped from my grasp. Dark liquid spread across the path like spilled secrets. The sound must have caught their attention. Delia's head turned, her gaze sweeping the park until it locked with mine across 50 feet of autumn grass. I waited for shame to cross her face, for guilt to shatter her composure, for some sign that betraying her only sister cost her something. Instead, she straightened her spine and lifted her chin. The look in her eyes wasn't apologetic, it was defiant, almost triumphant, as if she'd finally claimed something she always deserved. Nathan noticed her stillness and followed her gaze. When he saw me, the blood drained from his face, leaving him pale beneath his weekend stubble. He took half a step forward, mouth opening then closing. 3 years of loving him, of planning a future, of sharing dreams and fears and silent midnight conversations distilled into this single tableau of betrayal. I could have stormed across the grass, demanded explanations, created the scene they clearly expected, the wronged woman, wild with grief and rage. Instead, I turned and walked away, my steps measured and calm. Their eyes burned into my back, but I didn't give them the satisfaction of looking back. The next morning, I sat in my parents' kitchen, the morning light painting everything in cruel clarity. My mother's teacup rattled against its saucer as I finished telling them. Nathan and Delia. My father's voice emerged like granite cracking. His weathered hands, the same hands that had held mine at the wedding venue, now clenched into fists on the oak table. Together. I nodded. Once, the movement sharp. "She is no daughter of mine," he declared, rising from his chair with such force it scraped against the floor. The sound made my teeth ache. My mother's tears fell silently, tracking down her lined face. How could she do this to her own sister? She reached for my hand. Across the table. Her own blood. This betrayal, my father began, his voice thunderous with righteous anger. Dad, I interrupted him quietly. Don't cut her off completely. This is between us. They both stared at me, confusion mingling with their anger. Not that I'm defending her, I clarified. But dividing this family further won't fix anything. Later, I stood in what was once our apartment, mine and Nathan's. Half the closet was empty. His books were gone from the shelves. The silence held a different quality now, hollow rather than peaceful. On the kitchen counter, weighted down by his spare key, I found a note. His handwriting, once so familiar, now looked like a stranger's scrawl. I'm sorry, it just happened. 5 words to explain the demolition of 3 years. As if betrayal were a weather event, unexpected and beyond control. As if falling in love with my sister were a random accident, like slipping on ice. I crumpled the note, then smoothed it flat again, folding it precisely into quarters before tucking it into my pocket. Evidence, though I wasn't sure of what. In the spare bedroom that served as our shared office, I found a small leather-bound planner wedged behind the desk. Delia's handwriting filled the margins. Coffee with N, lunch with N, museum with N. Dates stretching back 4 months, carefully coded but unmistakable once you knew the truth. The hospital badge on my kitchen counter caught the afternoon light. Massachusetts General Hospital. Dr. Kelly Brenner, internal medicine. My career, my calling, now tied to a city suddenly filled with landmines of memory, every street corner potentially hiding my sister and my former fiancé. I traced the embossed letters of my name, feeling the weight of decisions yet unmade pressing against my chest. Boston had always been home, but home required safety, and safety required trust. Neither existed for me here anymore. A month later, I slid the last cardboard box into my Honda's back seat, the springs groaning in protest. 3 years of medical residency and years with Nathan, all packed into a vehicle that had seen better days. My fingers lingered on the worn upholstery, finding comfort in its familiar texture. That's the last one, I told myself, my voice sounding foreign in the empty Boston apartment. The morning sunlight caught dust motes swirling through the room that once held our future. 2 weeks ago, I sat across from Dr. Winters in her office, watching concern crease her forehead as I explained my request for transfer. Trinity Care in Oregon? She removed her reading glasses, rubbing the indentation on her nose. Kelly, you're on track for chief resident next year. This is unexpected. I straightened my spine, the way I did when delivering difficult news to patients. It's a rural healthcare position. They need someone with my training. She studied me, seeing past my practiced composure. The hospital grapevine had spread news of my wedding disaster with ruthless efficiency. Sometimes starting over is the bravest choice we make, she said finally, her pen hovering over my transfer request. But are you certain? Boston Memorial has invested in you. We see your potential. My fingers twisted the bare spot where my engagement ring once sat. I'm certain. The scratch of her signature across the paper sounded like freedom. Now, standing in the doorway of what was once our home, I allowed myself one last sweeping glance. The walls were bare except for the nail holes marking where our photos once hung. I didn't need physical reminders of the life I was leaving behind. Those images were burned into my memory with painful clarity. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Are you sure about this, sweetheart? Your father and I worry. I typed back, I'll call from the road. Love you. What I didn't say was, asterisk, I can't breathe in this city anymore. Every street corner holds a memory of Nathan. Every hospital corridor carries whispers about the doctor whose fiancé ran off with her sister, asterisk. The highway stretched before me like a promise as I left Massachusetts behind. Each mile marker put distance between me and the shattered pieces of my former life. I rolled down the windows, letting the wind whip through my hair, carrying away the scent of antiseptic and betrayal. By Nebraska, I found myself singing along to the radio for the first time in months. In Wyoming, I pulled over to Watch a sunset that painted the sky in colors I'd forgotten existed. Montana brought a thunderstorm that matched the turbulence inside me, a violent cleansing necessary. When I finally crossed into Oregon 7 days later, exhaustion and anticipation warred within me. The landscape transformed from flat expanses to rolling hills dotted with pines. Wren Hill appeared. Around a bend in the road, small, unassuming, perfect. My cabin sat at the edge of town, partially hidden by towering evergreens. The real estate agent called it rustic charm. Translation: weathered. Wooden siding that needed fresh paint and a porch that tilted slightly to the left. But when I turned the key in the lock, something settled in my chest. The rooms were small but filled with late afternoon light. The kitchen cabinets hung crooked, but the pine floors felt solid beneath my feet. No ghosts here. No memories. Just possibility. Dr. Brenner. A voice called from the gravel driveway the next morning as I unloaded boxes from my car. Dr. Patricia Morgan stood with her hands on her hips, her silver haircut in a practical bob. As Trinity Care's director, she'd interviewed me via video call, her no-nonsense questions paired with unexpected kindness. "I thought you might need this." She held up a basket covered with a checkered cloth. "Welcome breakfast. Nobody should face unpacking on an empty stomach." She didn't ask about Boston or Nathan or why a promising doctor would choose tiny Wren Hill over a prestigious residency. Instead, she helped me carry in boxes, commenting on the cabin's good bones and pointing out which floorboards creaked. Over coffee and still warm muffins, she outlined my first week. "We're short-staffed, so you'll hit the ground running. Hope that's okay." "It's exactly what I need," I said, and meant it. Later, I walked Wren Hill's main street, all 4 blocks of it. No one turned to stare. No one whispered behind their hands. The anonymity wrapped around me like a blanket. I passed a hardware store, a diner, a small library, a bookshop with a local history display in the window, a coffee shop where the barista called everyone honey regardless of age. At Trinity Care, my office was small but bright. The desk faced a window overlooking pine trees rather than city buildings. I unpacked my stethoscope, medical reference books, laptop. Last, I placed a single framed photo on the desk, my medical school graduation. Just me in my cap and gown, before Nathan, before the broken engagement. A reminder of why I was here. "Dr. Brenner?" Patricia appeared in my doorway. "Sorry to interrupt your settling in, but Mrs. Gardner needs a house call. Her arthritis is acting up and she can't make it to the clinic." I grabbed my medical bag without hesitation. "Give me the address." "You sure?" "You've barely unpacked." "I'm sure." The faster I plunge into this new life, the less time I'll have to remember the old one. 15 minutes later, I was in front of Mrs. Gardner's small blue house with wind chimes hanging from every available hook on her porch. When I knocked, a voice called, "It's open, doctor." She sat in a worn armchair, her hands twisted with arthritis, her eyes sharp with intelligence. "You're the new one," she said, assessing me. "From the big city." "Boston," I confirmed, kneeling beside her to take her blood pressure. "Running from something or towards something?" she asked, wincing as I gently examined her swollen joints. The question caught me off guard. "Both, I suppose." She nodded. Satisfied. "Good answer. Single direction never gets you anywhere worth going." She fixed me with a penetrating stare. "My Albert passed 3 years ago. Married 57 years. Some folks around here still treat me like I might shatter." I adjusted her medication, explaining the changes as I wrote them down in large, clear letters. "You don't strike me as the shattering type, Mrs. Gardner." Her laugh filled the small living room. "Call me Edith, and you're right. Bent maybe, like these fingers, but not broken." Something passed between us. Understanding, recognition, 2 women reshaping their lives around absence. "You come for Sunday dinner this weekend," she said as I packed up my bag. No arguments. Doctors need feeding, too. Driving back to the clinic, I rolled down my window. The Oregon air smelled of pine and possibility. For the first time since watching Nathan walk away with my sister, I felt the tight band around my chest loosen. Not healing, not yet, but the first hint that healing might be possible. That night, in my cabin, I sat on the tilted porch with a cup of tea, watching stars appear in a sky unmarred by city lights. Tomorrow, I'd organize the town's first mobile health screening. Next week, I'd learn the names of my regular patients. This month, I'd paint the cabin's weathered siding. Small steps, new routes, one day at a time. 3 years later, I stood at the podium, bathed in the cool blue lights of the Seattle Convention Center, my notes perfectly aligned before me. The microphone picked up my steady voice as I gestured toward the projection screen behind me. Rural communities deserve more than weekend clinics and volunteer medical students, I said, clicking to the next slide, a simple graph showing Trinity Care's 3-year improvement in chronic disease management. They deserve continuity. They deserve doctors who know their names, their families, their stories. The audience of healthcare executives and physicians nodded in collective agreement. 3 years ago, I would have gripped the podium with white knuckles, afraid my voice might crack, terrified someone would stand up and call me a fraud. Today, my hands moved with purpose, emphasizing points I'd lived and breathed since arriving in Wren Hill. When Mrs. Gardner came to Trinity Care, she'd seen 14 different providers in 2 years. I paused, letting that number sink in. 14 different people asking the same questions, ordering the same tests, never connecting. Her irregular heartbeat to her insomnia to her anxiety. From the third row, Warren caught my eye. His subtle nod fueled my confidence. 3 years of mentorship turned friendship turned into something neither of us had named yet. Today, Mrs. Gardner manages her conditions with one primary physician, quarterly check-ins, and a community health worker who stops by for tea every Thursday. Her ER visits? 0 in the past 18 months. A murmur of approval rippled through the ballroom. This was my moment. The validation of everything I'd built from the ashes of my former life. Then I saw her. 5th row aisle seat. Delia, my sister, my betrayer. The sight of her hit me like a physical blow. She sat with perfect posture in a crisp coral blazer, her dark hair cut in a sleek bob that framed her face. A small silver name badge glinted on her lapel. Even from 30 feet away, I could read the company name, Metasphere Consulting. Our eyes locked. Her lips curved into a smile. That didn't reach her eyes. I forced myself to continue, my mouth suddenly dry. The cost savings from preventive care. My voice faltered for a fraction of a second, but I recovered. The cost savings from preventive care versus emergency intervention pays for our program 3 times over. Warren shifted in his seat. His attention now divided between me and the unwelcome visitor he'd spotted. His shoulders tensed as he made the connection. I clicked through the remaining slides, highlighting Trinity Care's community partnerships, our telehealth integration, our medication adherence rates. The data spoke for itself, a testament to work that saved me when I most needed saving. Thank you for your attention, I concluded. I welcome your questions. Hands rose throughout the audience. The moderator called on a hospital administrator from Minnesota, then a physician researcher from Johns Hopkins. Their questions were thoughtful, their interests genuine. Then the moderator pointed to the 5th row. Yes, the woman in coral. Delia stood, smoothing her skirt. Delia Sutton, healthcare media consultant with Metasphere. She omitted our shared maiden name, but several heads turned between us, the resemblance unmistakable. Whispers fluttered through the crowd. Dr. Brenner, your results are impressive, she began, her voice carrying the practiced warmth she used to disarm. I'm curious, given your background and personal journey, how do you address emotional resilience with your staff? After all, healthcare providers often face personal setbacks that could impact patient care. The question hung in the air. Every ear strained for my response, though few understood the knife edge hidden in her words. Warren stiffened, half rising before catching himself. The room held its breath. I looked directly at Delia, refusing to shrink. Character is built in moments of challenge, I said, my voice clear and unhurried. Every provider at Trinity Care understands that our patients bring their whole stories to us, not just their symptoms. We can hardly expect to treat them with compassion if we haven't done the work of understanding our own narratives. I allowed myself the smallest of smiles. Sometimes the greatest innovations come from rebuilding after loss. It forces us to question assumptions about what's necessary and what's merely comfortable. Delia's expression faltered. This wasn't the reaction she expected. The moderator cleared her throat. Next question, please. After the session, attendees clustered around me, business cards extended, invitations to collaborate offered. Through the crowd, I glimpsed Warren intercepting Delia in the hallway. Though I couldn't hear their exchange, his stance, protective, resolute, spoke volumes. Delia's face tightened before she turned and walked briskly toward the exit. Later that evening, Warren and I sat across from each other at a small waterfront restaurant. The Seattle skyline glittered across the harbor, lights dancing on the dark water. Conference director pulled me aside, Warren said. Breaking a piece of sourdough, said they've never seen such a graceful handling of an obvious ambush. I took a sip of wine. I almost froze when I saw her. No, one would have known. His eyes, warm and certain, met mine. Marian Hammond from the Westridge Foundation mentioned she canceled her meeting with Metasphere tomorrow. That wasn't my intention. I know. Warren reached across the table, his fingers stopping just short of mine. That's why it happened. Your work speaks for itself, Kelly. I placed my hand over his, the contact sending warmth up my arm. So does yours. Around us, the restaurant hummed with conversation and clinking glasses. Tomorrow, we'd return to Wren Hill, to our patients, to the life I'd carefully constructed. Delia would return to Boston, to whatever she'd made of the pieces she took from me. For the first time, I realized I didn't need those pieces back. 3 years later, I stood at the window of my childhood bedroom, watching early morning light filter through maple branches. The bedroom remained frozen in time, debate trophies, my medical school acceptance letter framed on the wall, and a photo of Dad teaching me to fish at Lake Winnipesaukee when I was 12. Every surface held memories that now ached with his absence. Downstairs, the grandfather clock, the one Dad restored the summer before I left for college, chimed 7 times. Its familiar tone only emphasized what was missing, his humming in the kitchen, the rustle of his newspaper, the soft padding of his slippers across hardwood floors. Warren appeared in the doorway, already dressed in his dark suit, his presence a steady anchor in this house of ghosts. Your mom made coffee, he said quietly. I nodded, smoothing invisible wrinkles from my black dress. I keep looking at his chair in the living room, expecting him to be there. Warren crossed the room and stood beside me, his shoulder touching mine. We'd been married 2 years, but in moments like this, I still marvel at how he knows exactly when to speak and when to simply exist alongside my grief. Downstairs, Mom wrapped her arms around me, her embrace fierce despite her diminished frame. She smelled of the lavender soap Dad always bought her for Christmas. He was so proud of you, Callie, she whispered against my hair. Every time your name appeared in a medical journal, he made copies. For everyone at his bridge club. I swallowed hard against the knot in my throat. I should have visited more. Nonsense. Mom pulled back, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. You built a life worth living, that's what he wanted most. Warren touched the small of my back as we gathered our things. His wedding band caught the light. Simple platinum, no diamonds, no betrayals. The funeral home sat on Beacon Street, its brick facade somber against a cloudless October sky. We arrived early, greeting the director and reviewing arrangements one final time. The chapel filled gradually with Dad's colleagues, neighbors, and friends from the university where he taught economics for 30 years. At precisely 11:07, 17 minutes after the service was scheduled. To begin, the rear doors swung open. The low murmur of respectful conversation faltered. Delia strode in, Nathan one step behind her. My sister wore a designer black dress with an elaborate, jeweled collar that caught the light from stained glass windows. Nathan's watch, platinum and ostentatious, flashed as he helped her remove a fur-trimmed coat. Subtle as a hurricane, Warren murmured, his hand finding mine. Delia made her way through the gathering, stopping to accept condolences with practiced grace. Her performance was flawless, the bereaved daughter returning home, chin tilted at the perfect angle of dignified grief. Nathan hovered awkwardly beside her, clearly uncomfortable as several of Dad's oldest friends stared with undisguised judgment. I focused on greeting Professor Williams, Dad's department chair, when a cloud of expensive perfume announced my sister's approach. Callie, Delia, air kissed near my cheek. Her eyes, so similar to mine in color but nothing else, scanned me quickly. Still on your own, little sister? I worried you might be alone today. Warren stepped forward before I could respond, his hand extended. Dr. Warren Cole, Callie's husband. The ripple of recognition moved through nearby mourners. Dad's closest friends smiled knowingly. Delia recovered quickly, but not before I caught the flicker of surprise. 2 years now, isn't it? I'm sorry we couldn't attend the wedding. No invitation was sent, I said simply. From the corner of my eye, I saw Nathan freeze mid-conversation. The color drained from his face as he recognized Warren, the respected medical researcher who, 4 years ago, rejected Nathan's rushed proposal for investment in his medical technology startup. Warren had seen through the sketchy business model within minutes. If you'll excuse us, I said, they're ready to begin. The service unfolded with dignified simplicity. When it was time for the eulogy, I approached the podium, feeling the weight of 200 eyes upon me. The paper in my hands remained unread. I knew these words by heart. My father believed that life reveals character through our choices. I began. Not the easy ones made in daylight with everyone watching, but the hard decisions made in darkness when no one would know the difference. As I spoke about Dad's integrity, his dedication to students, his love of classical music, I watched faces in the congregation. Mom nodded gently in the front row. Warren's eyes never left mine, and somewhere in the middle, Delia shifted uncomfortably. As several heads turned subtly toward her. Dad taught me to choose the right people to trust, I continued. He showed me that true success isn't measured by appearances or possessions, but by the lives you touch and the good you leave behind. After the service, people gathered around Mom and me, sharing stories and offering support. I noticed how Delia stood increasingly alone, Nathan absorbed in his phone across the room. The power had shifted, not through confrontation, but through the quiet testimony of choices made and lives built. At the cemetery, autumn leaves carpeted the ground in gold and crimson. I placed a single white rose on Dad's casket, his favorite flower from the garden he'd tended for 40 years. Delia stood awkwardly at the edge of the gathering, her stiletto heels sinking into soft earth, her expensive dress fluttering in the October wind. As we turned to leave, Warren whispered, "Your father would be proud of how you handled today." I looked back once. Delia remained by the grave, finally alone with the father whose approval she never stopped seeking, but never learned how to earn. In that moment, revenge seemed a hollow concept compared to the simple peace of knowing who you are and being exactly where you belong. The mountains of western Oregon rose around us like guardians as Warren's truck wound along the familiar curves toward home. After 2 weeks away, the Douglas firs stood taller in my memory there, evergreen scent filtering through the partially opened window. Warren's hand found mine across the console, his thumb tracing small circles against my skin. "You okay?" he asked, eyes flicking between me and the road ahead. I turned from the window, studying the lines of his face, the silver threading through his temples that wasn't there when we first met. "Better now," I said, meaning it. Boston felt like another lifetime. The tension that had coiled in my shoulders since my father's funeral began to unravel with each mile marker we passed. Warren didn't press for conversation. Understanding the quiet space, I needed to transition between worlds. The radio played softly. Fleetwood Mac, my father's favorite, and I let myself remember him without the overlay of Delia's performance at the funeral, without Nathan's uncomfortable hovering near the back of the church. When we crest the final hill overlooking Wren Hill, the late afternoon sun caught on the river that cut through the valley. The scattered buildings of our town nestled against the landscape than imposing upon it. Our cabin sat on the eastern ridge, its cedar siding weathered to a soft gray. "Look," Warren said softly, nodding toward the driveway. 3 cars were parked beside our porch. Through the kitchen window I could see movement. Patricia's silver bob, the broad shoulders of Sam from the pharmacy, Eliza's bright scarf as she arranged something on our table. "They didn't have to do that," I whispered, unexpected tears pricking my eyes. Warren squeezed my hand. "That's Wren Hill for you. We take care of our own." Inside, the scent of rosemary chicken and fresh bread wrapped around us. Patricia hurried forward, enveloping me in a hug that smelled of her lavender perfume. "We figured you wouldn't want to cook tonight," she said, pulling back to examine my face. "You look tired, sweetheart." Sam passed me a glass of wine. "To your dad," he said simply. "Patricia told us he was a good man." I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. These people never met my father, yet they honored him because he was mine. The contrast between this sincere kindness and the strained formality of Boston crashed over me. "It feels good to be home," I managed finally, looking at the faces around me, not colleagues, but friends who became family when my own fractured. Later, after everyone left, Warren brought in the mail that was collected during our absence. Among the bills and medical journals sat a cream envelope with my mother's handwriting. "She already wrote?" Warren asked, settling beside me on the sofa. The letter was brief. Nathan's medical technology company had failed. Investors pulled out after a product safety scandal. Delia had filed for divorce, moved back to their childhood home in Vermont. Warren watched my face as I folded the letter. "Feel vindicated?" he asked carefully. I considered the question, searching for the satisfaction I might have once expected to feel. "No," I answered, surprising myself with the truth of it. "No one wins when a family breaks." Warren nodded, drawing me against his chest. "That's why I married you," he murmured into my hair. "Your heart makes room for understanding without requiring you to make room for toxicity." Outside our window, the Oregon sunset painted the sky in shades of amber and lavender. Birds called to one another as they settled for the night. This place, this life we'd built, held nothing of what I once thought I wanted, yet contained everything I never knew I needed. Trinity Care's rural healthcare model is being adopted in 3 more states, I told Warren, thinking of the award letter. That arrived before we left for the funeral. "They want me to head up the regional implementation team." His eyes crinkled at the corners. "Dr. Brenner changing American healthcare from a cabin in Wren Hill. Your father would have loved that story." I rested my head against his shoulder, watching the last light fade beyond our porch. The swing swayed gently beneath us, its familiar creak a counterpoint to the evening chorus of crickets and distant owls. Some people steal what you thought you needed, so you're forced to find what you actually deserve.